Welcome to Keeping It Real on Purpose. I am your host, Edna White, and this is a place where we talk to real people with real stories about real things to motivate and inspire us in our daily lives, all on purpose. Today, on Author's Insight segment, we have none other than an amazing author, Dr. Brad Montage. And he's going to talk to us about exposing Lyme and chronic illness. Welcome to the show, Dr. Brad.
Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to this dialogue. I think this will be fun.
Oh, you're so welcome. So, how do you show up in the world?
Um, Depends on which hat, but because I have so many of them.
Hmm.
If we keep it related to the book, um, I started having chronic illness problems when I was a very young child, and
Okay.
I had them a large part of my life. I've had chronic candida issues, fungal issues,
Hmm.
vertigo so bad I couldn't hardly stand up. I've had Lyme disease. I've never got any answers from any of the clinicians that I've seen, and I've seen
Right.
from a multitude of different professional backgrounds. A good friend of mine's one of the top functional medicine docs in his part of the country. Um, no one could ever give me answers. I had tools that had to be developed, and I had to figure out all my own answers. And I really believe
Hmm.
that is where virtually everybody with chronic health issues is. There's this huge frustration of
Right.
this question of what's going on inside of me. Why can't anybody tell me what's causing this? What's the
Hmm.
progression? How do I stop it? How do I regain my health? What's going on? How do I restore my life?
Yeah.
And that's the inspiration for that book because you read it. I think you had your
Mhm.
staff read it. It's put together differently than almost any
Oh,
book on
yeah.
health that I've never seen anything like it because
Yeah.
it talks about the mechanics, the nuts and bolts on how all of these things start to happen inside of a body. And it's
Yeah.
from there that you can understand how they need to be addressed because rarely are they.
Yeah, and I think when I was going through the book, I was like, oh my goodness, there's so much that really needs to to be revealed because you take on inside of the book, you expose a lot of things, and then you share how it starts. How do you develop it? How do they even say that you have it, and they kind of link it to different symptoms, and it's like it's jam packed. I'm telling you guys, it's really jam packed, and I don't want to say secrets, but I want to say, okay, we can say secrets. That the things I didn't know, like it was like it was so enlightening. I was like, wow, wow. I want to talk about Lyme disease because I know in our community, my community, when there's an issue with Lyme, right, and you can take this apart and talk about it, but when there's issues with Lyme disease or when they don't know, and I've seen this a lot, when they don't know what something is and they can't figure out where it comes from, then all of a sudden they attach all these as symptoms to okay, it must be this, and then they come up with Lyme disease. Never being bitten by a tick or anything, or could say, but talk about Lyme disease and how it starts and how it affects us. The just having the diagnosis.
Okay. I'll stay with this. Most people don't understand what a diagnosis is, but a
Hmm.
diagnosis is just an insurance code to authorize a doctor to
Oh, that's
bill
good.
insurance.
Yeah.
And whenever you have a diagnosis, you're locked into the insurance's accepted means to address it, which is
Oh, that's
almost
very good.
never effective.
That's very good.
So, so I'll start with that. Most people, there's so many lies about Lyme disease. The
Hmm.
the way it's transferred, there's a multitude of ways of transfer. Ticks do not have to be involved.
Right.
It's it's a fluid transfer disease. It's very similar to
Hmm.
syphilis,
Okay.
and it looks like the government actually hot rodded syphilis and created Lyme disease because
Oh,
the bacteria that causes Lyme disease, it looks like a corkscrew. It's called a spirochete. That's what
yeah. Uh-huh.
syphilis was. Syphilis was the most impossible disease to deal with of all time. Lyme is
Right.
that hot rodded. So anything that transfers fluid from one body to another, that can be gnats, mosquitoes, biting flies, spiders
Hmm.
down in the
Hmm.
south, sharing a milkshake
Okay.
with
Got you. Got
somebody,
you.
kissing, it's in sexual fluids, it crosses
Right. Okay.
dental barriers, it's
Right.
in
Right.
it's in the blood bank. So there's a multitude of ways
Oh,
you get it.
that's I didn't know that one. That one's good. It's
Two to
an
three
it's
percent of the blood bank in Minnesota and
Mhm.
Wisconsin has Lyme disease in it.
Oh wow.
Um, the diagnostic means for doing that, the lab tests,
Hmm.
the best Lyme labs used to say their tests were 0 to 20% accurate. Now the
Okay.
best Lyme lab in the world just has on their website, our tests are not a diagnosis. So
Hmm.
the the they test for Lyme disease for the strain that the CDC accepts. It's the B31 or the Burgdorferi strain of Borrelia
Uh-huh.
that causes Lyme disease. Borrelia is almost never the cause of Lyme disease. We test for a whole bunch of strains. It's it's probably less than 5% of the people we find with Lyme disease have the the strain that they test for, the
Right.
Burgdorferi or the B31. So that's one of the issues. One of the
Hmm.
biggest things with Lyme disease is something sets the stage for it to grow inside of somebody. And that stage beats the immune system up so the immune system can't do what it's supposed to do.
Hmm.
The primary thing that sets that stage is candida infections.
Okay.
So that's what beats the immune system up. It rips the gut up. It is by far the number one predisposing factor, and it is the number one complication of Lyme disease. Lyme disease, when you address it right, can be you can get rid of it in in a couple of months. most of
Really?
the most of the co-infections in that, but you can't that doesn't happen with the medical route. When you look at the medical route using antibiotics, even Harvard admits that doxycycline, what they prescribe, will not kill the Lyme bacteria. It only hopes to slow its division down so it doesn't take over. The antibiotics drive it into biofilms. It hides in biofilms. Your immune system can't touch it in the biofilm.
Hmm.
The antibiotic can't touch in the biofilm. They can live in biofilms for 17 years. It waits till you get all stressed out, your immune system's beat out, then it breaks out, has a happy party, and there
Oh.
you're overwhelmed all over again. So people talk
Hmm.
about remission. Remission is a medical term for reducing Lyme disease, making so it's not symptomatic. But as soon as they get stressed out, they're going to get basically hit by a bus and feel like they're in the gutter again.
Right. You
One
talked
of the
about, you just said something about Candido. Can you break that down in relevance to Lyme?
okay, can in all of our mucous membranes, from the nose, mouth, all the way down through the stomach, and through the
Hmm.
whole gut, there's a bacterial coating that does most of our digestion. It does
Okay.
a whole bunch of things. It communicates with the brain. Half your immune system is in the gut because it has to deal with all these things that are coming in.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's a balance of microbes, bacteria, viruses, yeasts, parasites, and all that called the flora or the microbiota inside the gut. When there's a candida infection, the microbiome has been beat up, the healthy part of it, which keeps all the things in check. So the
Right.
pathogens can grow. And one of the biggest pathogens that grows probably 80% of the time is candida. It's a yeast infection that can morph into fungus. Fungal parasite is closely associated to mold. And those things just beat the immune system up. A lot of
Hmm.
women know of yeast infections in their reproductive tract. The reproductive tract, the bacterial coating inside of that is almost identical to what's in the gut.
Hmm.
Grown and, grown and maintained slightly differently. But if somebody's having athlete's foot, ringworm, toe fungus, uh,
Hmm.
yeast infections, things like that, they absolutely have a candida
Hmm.
problem. And that's typically what sets the stage for
Okay.
the immune system to be too beat up to be able to deal with incoming invasions. And then you look at Lyme disease, it never comes by itself. It always comes,
Well, that's
it's
good.
kind of like, oh, if you look at the Bible when Jesus talks about when a man is possessed by a demon. The demon goes out, searches through waterless places, searching to
Oh,
find a place
yeah.
of rest. Can't
Yeah.
find any. Comes back to its house, talking about the man, that's clean, well swept, and put in order. And it goes out, finds
That's
7
good.
demons that are worse than itself. And the second state of
Hmm.
the man is worse than the first. That's what
Yeah.
Lyme disease is like. It it
That's good.
lives with and cohabits with
Hmm.
all of these pathogens that are just evil and wicked.
Right.
They're just, that's probably the easiest way to describe it. They're just
Yeah, that
evil.
was really good. That's a really good analogy. I like
Okay,
that. That's really good. That made more sense. It made a lot of sense.
good,
It's good.
good. And
It's really
what
good.
happens is, say in a tick,
Hmm.
if there's a tick bite, and I just said that's not the only way this can happen, but
Right.
uh, David Buhner, in he writes about what goes on inside of a tick. The tick, it gets a change in temperature as it's starting to take a blood meal and a change in pH. As that happens, all these bacteria with Lyme disease and the co-infections go with it, they assemble and they start to communicate and they start to
Hmm.
make this game plan. They start to put on their armor. They read the proteins inside of the blood and they coat themselves with our own proteins, the host proteins that they're going to go invade. So the immune system doesn't recognize them as foreign invaders, but it looks at them and says, oh, it's me. They're
Right.
covered with the same protein
Okay.
that you're made of. And then they have this
Mm.
game plan and they go out and to some are on attack mode, some are trying to go dive into different tissues to go hide and take up residence and multiply, and they create all these intricate defenses that go on back and forth. They only use a bloodstream for a highway. They don't grow in the bloodstream. They dive out of the bloodstream very quickly so they can go someplace away from the immune system and
Hmm.
grow and do what their thing is. So
Right.
that can be in joints, it can be in muscles, it can be in bone, it can be in the brain, it's going to
Okay.
be in the liver because the liver is going to filter things out. If Babesia is one of the biggest parasites linked with that. Babesia is a one-celled animal that lives inside your red blood cells and basically
Hmm.
eats the inside of your blood cells out. So it makes you anemic where you
Hmm.
don't have the capacity to carry oxygen. It gives you malaria-like fevers and very closely related to malaria and dengue fever also. But it gives you these really, really high fevers and it depresses your ability to carry oxygen, which makes you feel like you're walking like under 10 feet of water.
Hmm.
You can't breathe
Okay.
very well. You have no energy, nothing to fight anything. That's one of the co-infections. Ehrlichia is another
Hmm.
one. It's a little round bacteria that goes and invades your immune cells, your white blood cells, and it knocks out your immune system.
Hmm.
There's another one called rickettsia. It's a kind of a cylindrical shaped bacteria that goes and invades your epithelium. our epithelium is things like our skin. It doesn't evade
Yeah.
that.
Hmm.
It's the
Right.
lining of your blood vessels and the lining of
Okay.
your gut. So when it invades the lining of your blood vessels, it makes the blood tumble as it goes down through your bloodstream. And it creates
Hmm.
all these inflammatory issues there. And when it
Right.
invades the lining of your gut, it makes your gut leak, makes it so you don't digest things right. It creates
Oh
all
wow.
of these things. The babesia, the blood parasite, it tends to concentrate where blood gets squeezed through really tight places, which that's the lungs, the kidneys, the
Okay.
liver,
Okay.
the spleen especially. And whenever the spleen is really weak, it's a huge flag that there's a babesia infection.
Hmm.
The lab tests for all of these things are 0 to 20% accurate. So there's not a good way that any traditional route of healthcare, using a traditional route like lab tests, can come
Hmm.
up with any definitive diagnosis
Okay.
because those lab tests are only had 0 to 20% accuracy if you took them the first 1 to 2 weeks of infection, which nobody knows they're
Hmm.
sick then.
Right.
And after that, they have no relative accuracy whatsoever. Like
Right. You know
one
what's really going on.
one study they took,
Mhm.
I think it was 172 patients that had Lyme disease, overtly obvious Lyme disease. They took
Mhm.
3 blood draws from each of those people. So they had 500, I think it was 516 blood draws. They carefully labeled them, not using their ID, but they code labels. And they sent
Mhm.
those 516 lab samples off to the best Lyme labs in the world. Sometimes one lab got 3 tests, sometimes 3 different labs got 1 sample. Of those 516 lab samples, no 2 results were the same.
Wow.
That's how accurate the tests are. They're just
Mhm.
not accurate at all. And
Right.
with even places like Harvard saying that the means of treatment doesn't address the problem, that's what everybody's running into. And as soon as you
Right.
take the antibiotics, it kills all the good flora inside of your gut.
Mhm.
As soon as you
I know
kill
that I
the
heard that. Yeah.
good flora, it also the
Mhm.
lining of your
Mhm.
gut. If you hold your fingers up in front of your face, um,
Mhm.
all your fingers, those are what's called the microvilli in your gut.
Mhm. Okay.
And it
Okay.
increases the surface area of your gut about 400 times. And
Okay.
in between your fingers, the microvilli, they produce a mucus, and it fills the space in between the microvilli and over the top. That's where all your flora live. And
Okay.
anything that creates inflammation, which antibiotics do, it makes those microvilli, like your finger, they atrophy, and it's like you take your finger and you roll them so you're just looking at the knuckles on your fist. That's all
Oh
that's
wow.
left. No surface to make mucus, no place for the flora to
Right.
hide. It all washes out in the toilet, and then the pathogens can grow unchecked, no check
Right.
and balance. So you take 1 dose
Yeah.
of some of the strong broad spectrum antibiotics, it can destroy your flora, just 1 dose, and it won't
Oh wow.
recover ever. You
Right.
take a long
Wow.
course like we're
Ever? You
ever.
said ever? Oh wow.
Right.
Oh
You
wow.
have to do specific things to heal it. If we didn't have, if I myself, I didn't have a big background in gut health, how to
Mhm.
deal with candida and resolve that, we could do nothing with Lyme disease. Could not
Oh,
touch it.
wow.
That's what gave me a lot of the tools we use to address it.
Right.
But so
So
that's
how do you start to begin to deal with that? How do you start to deal with those things? Talk about that.
okay. We do our own diagnostics.
Okay.
And years ago, the Lord was moving us out of where we used to live. People begged us to figure out a way to work with them with a distance. And I didn't have the belief system for it. I really
Mm-hmm.
didn't. So I was putting them off, but it made it, the Lord is making it very clear. He's moving us a long ways away.
Mm-hmm.
So I finally said, okay, I'll test this out. So I started testing people at farther and farther distance. And at the end of our testing, we tested people blindly, not knowing who they were, what they had. We did a pretty comprehensive evaluation, which my evaluations is hundreds of tests, hundreds, no matter
Mm-hmm.
what's going on with somebody, because you gotta know all the intricate functions of every organ system by itself, how it all those interact, what root problems are that cause that, how to resolve that. You got to know food
Okay.
intolerances, and then you got to know all these infective, toxic issues and all that. So you got to start off with an accurate assessment of what's going on, and the only ones
Mm-hmm.
that have any tools to do that is the functional medicine doctors.
What is
Uh,
it? What is it called?
functional
Doctor?
med
Okay.
functional medicine doctors.
Okay.
Um, and they got to be old school because the new school ones are doing everything
Yeah.
by lab tests and
With
all
the
that. So they
medications. Yeah.
they got to be old school for it to help anybody out at all.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't we don't go after Lyme disease. We don't go after Candida. What we do is we figure out what root causes are, and we support the body to restore all of the metabolic functions, all these intricate interactive metabolic functions. Then we figure out the foods they can eat so they can
Mm-hmm.
heal. We figure out liquids they can drink so they can heal and restore life. And it's on top of that that we look and go, okay, what do we need to do to address the toxic loads? Like toxicity is always a problem. There's two major uh, stages of detoxification.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at a business talk a while back where there were three other doctors there. Somebody asked me, what do you do with COVID? And uh, I said, I'm about to release my book. We could talk about the book, or I could just do a Q&A. I got a pretty deep well where you could bounce anything off. And so one of the other docs asked, what do you do with COVID? And that opened up
Right.
the conversation they were not ready for, blew them all away. And in explaining that, I said, okay, your immune system, or you've got four detoxification organs. What are they? And they had to guess to figure out one, which was a liver. That's one of four. It's the small intestinal wall is another one. The colon wall is another one. And the flora we just talked about, the microbiome coating of the gut and reproductive tract, ears, nose, throat, mouth, all of that, that is the fourth one. They
Mm-hmm.
do the detoxification in two phases, phase one and phase two. Phase one has five pathways, phase two has six pathways. You gotta you gotta figure out which phase is working right, which phase isn't. You gotta
Mm-hmm.
figure out which stage in those phases is not working right, how to support those so you can increase your detoxification. Before you ever detox, I asked another group of clinicians uh, that I was we were doing an interactive thing. I said, what is the first thing you do for detox? Everybody had different ideas about things because they don't
Mm-hmm.
understand the mechanics of what's going on and they're just
Right.
grabbing at straws. And I said, the first thing you have to do is upregulate elimination.
Mm.
If you try and liberate toxins and you haven't liberated, you have an increased ability to excrete those in the toilet, you're going to make people sicker.
Yeah.
So normal
Yeah.
bowel habits should be 3 to 5 times a day, and that's not my idea. That's them looking at studies of people that don't have any incident of gastrointestinal disease. Africa
Right.
is one of the biggest places where that happens when people have a whole food tribal type of a diet with this big complex thing. Every time they eat, they have a bowel movement. So
Mm.
in the Western society, the worst case I saw a woman was going once every 5 to 6 weeks.
Oh wow.
People should know that's not healthy. You
Yeah.
can't you can't try and do any detox doing less than 2 bowel movements a day. And vegetables fiber is the biggest factor to try and upregulate that.
Mm.
You increase your fluid intake so you're urinating. Women need to urinate at least 8 times a day, men at least five. That's the first thing you do. Then you got to figure out what's going on with the detox pathways, support those. Then you can
Mm.
start to use different products to deal with
Right.
the infective issues, to start to bring those out. This combination of antimicrobials, good flora. Most of the
Okay.
antimicrobials aren't very good. The 75% of the fish oil in the market's rancid before you buy it. As far as
Yeah, I was
flora
going to ask you
goes,
that.
the,
Mm-hmm.
the microbiome, it's worse than that. We've tested probably hundreds of
Mm-hmm.
different flora products. I know four that actually can work. That's
All
all.
right.
You know,
Yeah.
it's
So what I
bad.
need to ask you now is that we talked about a myriad of things, and um, it's some of it's complex to me and some is not. And I get what you're saying. Simplify this. What can if I go out and buy this book, simplify who needs to buy this book, simplify what we're looking at, or what you suggest people to do. Simplify that. You just to say, hey, you know, you need to go get this book and you need to read this book, but more than that, you need whatever.
Oh,
Simplify that for my
oh,
audience because they need to know, you're talking a lot of terms that they might not be familiar with. And in our community alone, um, speaking who could say very we speak in our own terms that we think everybody knows but maybe we don't, and I want the audience to really get this. Because I know it's important, but I want them to get it and I want it simplified. If you could do that for us, that'll
oh,
be like marvelous.
okay. Simply, the reason why you need the book is the reason why I wrote it. People need answers. They need to know what's going on. I've had
Hmm.
mothers bring their daughters in to say, you need to teach them about contraception. I am amazed how few women know how their bodies work, what their
Right.
psyche drives their cycles. We describe that. We go through every major physiological process in the body, all the major organ
Hmm.
processes, the hormonal dysregulation, autoimmune issues, detox issues, gut
Okay.
issues, food intolerance, respiratory issues, cardiovascular issues. It
Hmm.
covers everything because Lyme disease is, first of all, it's a great imitator. It imitates
Oh,
everything
that's
out
good.
there. All the
That's
people
good.
with dementia, Lyme disease is the biggest suspicion that there is.
Right,
And
that's good.
it can affect every single organ system in the body. So that this book isn't just about Lyme disease. That's why the second half of the title, and chronic
Yeah.
illness.
Yeah, chronic
Everything that
illness.
goes on, infertility is in there. The
Hmm.
disruption of intimacy from chronic illness, even menopause,
Oh, that's
that's in
good.
there. Everything that people need to know
That's good.
about how
Yeah.
things are working is in
Yeah.
there, and there's practical steps in there on what
Yeah.
people really need to do to try and gain uh, some control of their health
Yeah,
and
that's good.
life.
Yeah, control of their lives. Yeah. We want you to have audience, we want you to have control of your lives. And I think this, no, I don't think, I know that this book will start you on that path because I had to take it chapter by chapter and I was like, oh, this makes sense. And I had to stop and I was like, okay, I couldn't eat the whole elephant. I had to eat piece by piece. But this really, it solidified some things for me that I already knew, didn't know it scientifically, but it solidified some things for me. Who did you first give this book to? Like, how did you get it out there? I know that, I want to talk about like getting it out there. How did you get it out there to the public?
Okay, that's a really good question. I'm going to springboard off of what you just said so that people aren't afraid of the book. it's written in a common language. I don't
Yeah,
talk in
that's
this
good.
highfalutin language that people have a hard time
It is.
understanding. And
Right.
every chapter ends with a story of somebody who struggled with that aspect of organ dysfunction, physiological problems, hormone
Right.
dysregulation, whatever, with a story of what caused all that and how they overcame that. And only
Right.
so there's a lot of practical things in there, and
Hmm.
it really brings it home as far as that goes. Is written, the information there could be used in any graduate doctorate program,
Hmm.
but its language is made so that people like you can understand it. It's not written
Hmm.
above anybody's head. So
Right.
that's huge.
That's good.
You ask, how did I get it out there? This book
Yeah.
has been canceled by Amazon twice. And
Okay.
the yeah, it's really too much.
Hmm.
I was contacted by self-publishing school, went through that trying to avoid all the problems that I had the first time I did it. I doubled the
Uh-huh.
size of the book, wrote half that book in a long weekend, blew
Oh, wow.
everybody away in there. And because there's almost 200 references in that book. It's
Yeah.
a little over 300 pages. It's highly referenced.
Mhm.
It's not my opinions. And I could have doubled that reference. I just got tired of writing them. Okay. So I just got tired of writing all the sides.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
But anyway, I learned something in that process. The original title was Breaking the Chronic Nightmare of Lyme Disease. And
Mhm.
the political overlords with the political correctness, and I'm not a political correct person.
Mhm.
I don't speak out of disrespect, but I speak out of old world language.
Yeah.
And people understand that, and I don't offend people with doing that because they know I'm not pretentious. That I'm just speaking old
Yeah.
world language and
Yeah.
inclusive of things. So you can't address right now because of the watchdogs in all the arenas. You can't address health
Mhm.
issues head on with any way
Yeah.
whatsoever. We designed a title uh, that was mirrored after some other books that have been done and been fairly successful, and
Mhm.
Amazon just canceled it.
Oh,
Absolutely
okay.
would not allow it to be promoted whatsoever.
Mhm.
I did all
Mhm.
kinds of stuff. And the formatting was really a nightmare. That was done overseas, and it was really kind of a mess. And it took, the goal was to have that book. I finished it just before May. May is Lyme Awareness Month, and we were trying
Yeah.
to launch it during that month.
Uh-huh.
My
Right. Right.
editor finished editing it in like 7 days, and then went off to the formatter. That took him 4 months to
Mm.
get it out. So that ruined that. And you gotta ask these questions about, okay, who's going to
Yeah.
format? How long are they going to take? How much communication
Mhm.
going to be like?
Mhm.
What can you do with your editor? What's that? What will Amazon, who is the biggest self-publishing platform that's out there, what will they accept? That's changed. I
Right.
was led down the wrong road, and it didn't work. So I hired some other people. I came up with all the graphics for
Mhm.
the cover the way that it is, changed everything else, redid it, and now they actually allow me to promote it some. So
Right.
that's how it gets out there. You
Right.
can find the book on my website. It's
Okay.
healthfullyu.com,
Okay. Mhm.
HEALTHFULLY, the letter U.com. It's in a sidebar. There's also a tab, line book. You can find it there. But
Mhm.
if you're dealing with autoimmune issues, it's a book for you. If you're dealing with hormonal
Yeah.
issues, it's a book for you. It
It's the book. Yeah.
addresses more things functionally than anything I've ever seen.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate, you being here and sharing this part with our audience. Audience, if you have any questions, anything at all, make sure you post them below the video, and I'll get them right over to Dr. Brad, and he can answer your questions, or you can go on his website, which he just talked to you about. You can go in there and leave the questions. Is there anything else that you could say to our audience before we leave and give them, I don't know, just give them some encouragement and empower them, to move forward in their lives on purpose?
Okay. One of the biggest things is affirmation is, and
Mhm.
that's a huge part of what we do. It's not
Mhm.
all in your head. There's a
Yeah,
cause for what's going on inside. And just because the clinicians you're working with don't know what that is, doesn't mean you're stuck with that forever. We have over 4 times the resolution
that's
back
right.
to full health than almost any clinician could ever hope to offer. Most people will say we work with Lyme disease.
Hmm.
We restore people back to full health and give them their life back at over 4 times what most could offer to even help. So, in affirming that one, there's a cause, and two, there is a route to restore your health and have your life back, that's what a lot of people say who work with us
That's
is
great.
he gave me my
That's
life back.
wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, Dr. Brad, thank you for sharing exposing Lyme and chronic illness, revealing secrets of all chronic illness that keeps you sick. And we appreciate you coming and sharing this with our audience. And we hope that you walk out today, guys, and go it, or you go online and you buy this book by Dr. Brad. This is Edna White and my esteemed guest, Dr. Brad, saying goodbye for now. And we hope to see you real soon.